Okay. I'm going to be reading from it's backwards, but it's called Bridget und andere Gedichte, Bridget and Other Poems. And the English is facing. It's done by Andreas Weiland, and he's a German poet, and it was a complete surprise to me. I had nothing to do with the book. He just was reading some of my work and liked it and translated it and wanted to do a book. He's doing some other books as well, and it was very kind of him. He did a great job. It also has an essay, a rather remarkable essay by Christopher Bernard at the end. May it be true. It's a very nice essay, fiction of a kind, but about me. But I'm very happy with the book. Actually, though, I just wrote something, and I didn't have something for this season, and now I do. That's a short poem, and I'll go into what I was planning to read after. It's called For the Speaker, Judas. It's Judas speaking. They didn't know what he looked like, so I had to tell them. We drew lots. Simon became the one to be Jesus, and Jesus became Simon. It was Simon I kissed, Simon who suffered. Jesus felt terrible about it, but he knew a good magician never reveals his tricks. Paul and all the others were bamboozled. It was Simon, Simon the Zealot, who was on the cross. Simon who died. It's my Easter poem.
Thank you.
Now, these are the poems I plan to read. And these are all, as I say, from Bridget, which is available from Amazon and from Abe Books if you don't want to deal with Amazon, from all sorts of people. Yes, Simon says, but not a simple Simon. Okay, this is the opening poem of the book. It's called Welcoming August 2022. I was born August 9th, 1940. Hail, birth month, thou who madest me lion, thou for whom the calendar was changed, turning the 7th month, September, into the 9th, the 8th into the 10th, the 9th to the 11th, and the 10th, December, turned into the 12th. Names, my own, John Wayne, named for my father's beloved brother, murdered by World War I, and not for Marion Morrison, the actor. Welcome, great month, in classic, closed form verse. Tremendous time repeats thee every year. The circle turns, and people all turn with it, and I return until it is my turn to turn into the dark, to close my eyes, and hope that something of me still may live. I was a man, then I'll be only words, nothing but these vowels and consonants. Turn, wheel. This next poem is the title poem of the book, though the full title is Bridget, pronounced Breed. The way in which, Bridie is another form of Bridget, the way in which those Irish words are written, and you have no idea how they're going to be pronounced. Thank you for the play on term, the remark. This is a long poem. It's going to go on for about 10 minutes. So settle in. If you drift away from it, it'll come back and it'll still be there. Bridget is the ancient Irish goddess of fire, poetry, fertility, household arts, smithcraft, etc. Christianized, she became one of the patron, in this case matron, saints of Ireland. My poem is an invocation, an attempt to make her happen. The poem will go on a ways and keep shifting among various voices, though everything has some relation to the figure of Bridget. I have a kind of vision of an Irishman and a priest walking on a hill, an old Christian priest walking on a hill, and The Christian priest says, "What's the name of this hill?" The Irishman says that the name of this hill is it's sacred to our goddess Bridget, the goddess of smithcraft and poetry and fire, etc. Good, says the priest. She's Saint Bridget now. That's what they did. And it's one of the things that the Protestants were protesting, the presence of pagan elements in the faith, like the Christmas tree. Bridget, pronounced Breed. From the look of her, not too good, but I expect she'll recover. It was like walking with the sun. Who are you to tell me what to do? Night falling, strange aims, strangeness, nothing to speak of. Hot night, endless. It was hard for a very long time. Feelings which are settled, no longer settled. Why don't you just take the car? I wish I could speak. I no longer feel as though my feelings, much past experience, convinces me that my capacity for self-delusion in these matters is, strictly speaking, boundless. When I took her home, she stayed very close to me as we walked. Her sheer presence was dazzling, wonderful. It was like walking with the sun. What do we read as we read? Books unread, barely regarded. Thinking is still contained in perceiving. Perceiving is still a thinking of the senses. Thinking is thinking. To overcome the world means to behold the world as it was before it became dead in us, during the months before the first menstruation, and for some time immediately afterwards. Girls are often passive, seem sleepy, and withdrawn to themselves. I guess the aleatory look at the spattered paper is supposed to play off the rigid deliberation of the ruled lines, but the results are consistently boring. Beautiful credit, the foundation of modern society. Who shall say that this is not the age of mutual trust, of unlimited reliance on human promises? Lotus bearer, Lord of the world, Lord of what we see, is also a timid man. The violence is never expressed physically, but only verbally, in the manner of certain painters who paint the same painting over and over again, writes the same poem over and over again. Form is not at issue. The beloved speaks softly out of a machine, her voice broken with sorrow. I can barely listen to you. I fall in love whenever I hear you speak. She is beautiful, blue-eyed, red-haired, self-destructive. She is dark, with gray in her hair. What does it mean to love? It is a kind of fiction, an agreement to be deceived. It is a word spoken in haste, powerful with fiction. The link in my mind between self-consciousness and religion. Religion is a mode of self-consciousness which doesn't admit to its own bases, a mode of self-remembering which continually manifests itself in an effort to forget. But imagination equals self-consciousness, that guiding point to which we can return, thought's tower. There are all these women. Which of them do you want? You. Secret looks, charms, words meant only for her. With his thing out, with his thing out, with cum on his thing, with cum on his thing, and the cum is soil. Well, said the little girl in the tree, some people call me Mother Elderberry, others call me the Dryad, but my real name is Memory. I sit in the tree that grows and grows. I can remember everything, and therefore I tell stories. Ours fear that if she analyzes it, it will go away. The child's fear of thought, the association of thought with death and growth, her "I'm a big girl now," her fascination with fear of death, all this suggests that she's reached a transitional point in her life, but that she lacks the resources to make the leap. At her age, 34, she is getting rather desperate. Prescription, no love affairs, women's groups for at least 6 months. Had you followed your impulses here, you might have arrived at something approaching understanding. But no, you chose to remain the critic, the judge, the expert. What is remains elusive. You can't name them because the power is too direct, but you can refer to them indirectly. They are called the shining ones, ones who inhabit any body. At the slipping shopping center, it is warm, a warm breeze, not enough. I close my eyes. She looked at me the way any man wants a woman to look at him. She looked radiant, beautiful. She was all the women I had ever desired. She told me she was about to throw up. Your body, endless time, sweeps everything. Wait and see. In the field, the children dance. I wish. My son chases the ball. Time fixes everything in the sense of affixes, immobilizes it. Light covers everything, touches it deeply as I touch you or would touch you. Eyes, Isis. It was the good crossing guard, Mary Foley. She stood in the path of a runaway car and pushed 7 children to safety. My first thought was that a child had been hit, said Sister Charlotte Ann. But no, it was Mary. We heard brakes screech and children scream. The kindly granny had helped youngsters survive the busy intersection near St. Mary's Grammar School and Melrose, Mass. for 10 years before her final act of love ended in tragedy. The outstanding thing about Mary was her giving character, said the Reverend John Finn, pastor of St. Mary's. There was not one selfish thing about her. She gave her life to the children. How does love linger in us? How does it speak? How does it rise again? What is the source of this connection? A strong ascetic element was present in Irish monasticism from the beginning, based on that of some of the early fathers who lived far from civilization in the desert, so that in remote and practically inaccessible places we find not only provisions for solitary hermits, but also small monasteries with 2 or 3 cells that might better be called communal hermitages. And so, just as from the fancy's image taken from the body, there arises in the appetite of sense a love inclined toward the senses, so from the intellect's universal species or reason, which is entirely remote from the body, there arises in the will another sort of love. Stunned in this wretchedness of silence, impression, expression, depression, pressure. What is it, love? Speech. It is therefore supposed. The lion continues. Destruction of structures means eye and foundation, jeered at as men. Superficial appearances are transmutations. On this account, to the path of Gimel, subconscious level was patroness, a curve which could. The history of poetry is a history of loss. It is necessary to put fresh flowers on her grave. Thin, beautiful body. Her father photographs loving, but there is an edge to his voice, a sharpness. Rita, listen. Not for long now. The abstracting by which she is able to make her points is also true of the magazine as a whole. What McLuhan calls a galaxy or constellation of events is absent from her work. Despite the attempted variety among the articles, love equals power equals imagination. The gods of the North have suffered 2 eclipses. First, by the advent of Christianity, which destroyed their shrines and condemned their stories, and then by the classical Renaissance, which as early as the 12th century gave Europe a repertoire of Greek and Roman myths, which almost completely annihilated the Germanic. Seeing at once too many people and too few, having the wrong relationship to people. What I call the auditory imagination is the feeling for syllable and rhythm, penetrating far below the conscious levels of thought and feeling, invigorating every word, sinking to the most primitive and forgotten, returning to the origin and bringing something back, seeking the beginning and the end, eyes elusive, distanced, polytropon, voyager, that man that came out of the sea. I don't know what to do. My editor hated the book. She cut out all of the history, all of the anthropology, and left me with just a few insights and a bunch of sex stories. I know what to do. Cut the insights. Sam Spade looked up as Bridget O'Shaughnessy popped another pill. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. I am the wind on the sea. I am a wave of the ocean. I am the roar of the sea. Fire, burning, red-headed woman. That's Bridget pronounced breed. A long one. Thank you for sitting through it. This is a short one. Many years ago, I was manager, that's a joke, of an art theater, an art cinema in Berkeley. Manager meant you were a ticket taker, basically, and you also had to climb on a ladder and change the stuff on the marquee. But that's what I was, and I was sitting there in this ticket booth alone. Inside, I could hear, and I was not allowed to go out of the ticket booth until a certain point had been reached. I had to stay in there for a certain amount of time. No one was around. Everybody else was inside, laughing their heads off, probably a Preston Sturges movie. It was wonderful. Thank you, Robert. Anyway, there I was in this ticket booth, and this is what I wrote. The skeleton's defense of carnality. The speaker is a skeleton. The skeleton's defense of carnality. Truly, I have lost weight. I have lost weight. Grown lean in love's defense, in love's defense grown grave. It was concupiscence that brought me to the state, all bone and a bit of skin to keep the bone within. Flesh is no heavy burden for one possessed of little and accustomed to its loss. I lean to love, which leaves me lean, to lean turn into lack. A wanton bone, I sing my song and travel where the bone is blown, and extricate true love from lust, as any man of wisdom must. Then wherefore should I rage against this pilgrimage from gravel unto gravel? Circuitous I travel from love to lack and lack to lack, from lean to lack and back. That's the skeleton's defense of carnality. And I'm going to conclude my portion. Thank you. I'm going to conclude my portion here with a poem about another poem. We call circuitous I travel indeed. Thank you. I like that word too. We call a poem that's about a visual piece of art an ekphrastic poem. This is not about a visual piece of art, it's about a poem. It's about Whitman's Out of the Cradle Endlessly Rocking, which I think is one of the great and definitive poems of American literature. And so I can't call it an ekphrastic poem. So I call it an expoesis from a poem. Whitman's Out of the Cradle Endlessly Rocking. I don't think there's another poem more unique and simultaneously more representative of what we may call the American spirit than this amazing presentation of the making of a poet, of the transformation of anyone from childhood to a condition of knowledge. How do we enter the world in a deep way? It is an aria, a performance, something Whitman saw in the opera houses, It is a multi-voiced, multi-selved poem in which all sorts of styles and voices are brought together, including the hissing voice of the old crone, the sea, and the voice of the bird, my dusky demon and brother, the lone singer wonderful. It is a poem about family, the he-bird, the she-bird. It is a poem about the stunning fact of death, the opener, and the great representation of the sea, Melville. The sea is the openness of consciousness. It is a nature poem in which the outsetting bard merges with what he sees. It includes Quakers, Ninth Month Midnight, and Native Americans, Pomonic. It is Whitman giving himself over to the sheer possibilities of music as world becomes word translated. It is an act of marvelous empathy and compassion in the literal sense, feeling with. It is a poem about the body and its transformation, even as Whitman speaks of the soul. It is a poem in which the lorn bird and the transforming boy move us to what Wallace Stevens called a new representation of reality. This, camarados, is the great mythic moment of American letters, and it takes place not at a desk, but outside, not as writing, but as brilliant, spontaneous, unexpected utterance. It ushers in, under the magical, multivalent moon, in the presence of the vast, talkative sea, nothing less than the world as song.
This is a poem I wrote for his 82nd birthday. A gift for him. Each moment in time is the tiniest of things, the most precious of things. You moving through the house singing a tune. I always smile to hear that and take great comfort in the sound. And there you are tapping a quick rat-a-tat-tat, seated of course, but always charming. And then you speak to me of Fred Astaire and Fouet Astoué and Be Still My Heart, the Nicholas brothers, undeniably the best tap dancers I've ever seen. You, the monster Jack Wack, and the entire country of Dalwakia have stolen my heart whole. But Charlie Chaplin, Laurel and Hardy, and even Buster Keaton live there now too. As does James Cagney and Yankee Doodle Dandy, Kurt Weill and Bertolt Brecht, September Song and Mac the Knife, the Threepenny Opera and Mahogany, George and Ira Gershwin, Rhapsody in Blue, Embraceable You in Summertime. Cole Porter, You're the Top, Night and Day, and I Get a Kick Out of You. George M. Cohan, Give My Regards to Broadway, Harrigan, and You're a Grand Old Rag. And of course Irving Berlin, A Pretty Girl is Like a Melody, Blue Skies and Always. All these songs and many others that I know and love, gifted by the man I adore. You've introduced me to some and deepened my appreciation for all. And oh my God, is that the Golden Gate Quartet? I didn't even know that human throats could produce those sounds. They were superb. And here too is William Shakespeare and William Blake, James Joyce and Ezra Pound, T.S. Eliot and Thomas Wolfe, and Kipling too, for his poem F, which you struggle to read without shedding tears. So endearing, you delight in sharing your joys, interests, and passions with me, and in the process, sometimes make them mine as well. What a gift these years have been. Your heart and hand in mine, your lap the place where I feel at home. You mean more to me than I can ever express, but to say the least, I love you, dearest, with all my heart. And at the end of the day, if you share your sorrows with me, I would spare you from them if I could, just as I know you would do the same for me. Your love, affection, and support keep me going on hard days when the pain is overwhelming. Happy 82nd birthday, sweetheart. I hope this is the beginning of a wonderful year with many things to look forward to. But I will discover that with you right here beside you, whatever happens. I know that we will weather the storms that arise together. I am here for you, my dearest. my sweet, embraceable you. All my love, Sangye.